Right, so this week's topics include Ringgit continuing downtrend to a 10-month low as the US Federal Reserve forecasts more interest rate hikes. Well, why is this the case? Well, recently the US inflation spiked back up to 3.7%. And next up, we will talk about how much should fresh grads earn. And this is based on the Belanjawanku study, which estimates that a single person living in the Klang Valley requires about 2,600 ringgit per month to survive. But obviously, not everybody lives in the Klang Valley, right? So we'll take a look at different regions and different salaries as well, lah. Yeah, this and more in our weekly analysis, as usual, and not financial or legal advice. So on to the first topic of the night. Yeah, it's not been a pretty sight for the ringgit lah. I'm sure some, if not most of you know what's going on right now. Okay. On a year-to-date basis versus the greenback, yeah, the dollar has rallied by 6.35% against our local note. And in the past 2 months alone, since August, the ringgit itself has depreciated by 3.77%. And if you look at its current level over here, 4.6850, which is Friday's closer, it has already surpassed the July low of about 4.66, 4.67, right? And it's now right now at a 10-month low. If we do go up, if we do depreciate some more, we are only 31 cents away from the 5 ringgit mark. Okay. And people, they are using this golden opportunity to blame it on the current administration. Yeah, it's Anwar's fault. Otherwise, it's Bank Negara Malaysia's fault. Yeah, Anwar should do something about it. Or Bank Negara Malaysia, you guys have a lot of money. You guys should raise the OPR, do something, turn on the jets for the ringgit, right? But actually, the recent depreciation of the local note is really related to the current administration of Bank Negara Malaysia. So, allow me to explain. But first of all, why do currencies fluctuate anyway? For those of you guys who do not know, factors that affect the value of a dollar: supply and demand, market sentiment and psychology, technical economic data. Now, if you notice, right, factors number two and three all boil down to factors number one. Why? Because if market sentiment is good towards a currency, then demand for that currency will increase, right? And at the end of the day, the currency will strengthen. So I would say the major factor that affects the exchange rate or value of a currency is supply and demand. And within that supply and demand, the significant driver of this factor is the interest rates set by central banks. You may have heard of the term before, higher interest rates lead to a stronger currency. Yeah, sort of like that. Okay. But why is this the case? Why do higher rates lead to a more stronger MYR or perhaps a more stronger USD? I'll give you a quick example. Imagine a scenario between two banks. Okay, so Bank A and Bank B. Bank A gives you 3% for your fixed deposits. And meanwhile, Bank B gives you 5.25% per annum. Now, assuming that both banks are roughly the same size and they are well capitalized, etc., etc., which bank would you choose for a fixed deposit? Well, obviously, undoubtedly, Bank B, right? Because it gives the higher return. So this is the same case for the ringgit's recent weakness. Because if you take a look at what the US is doing, the Federal Reserve, right? They've raised rates 11 times since 2022, from 0.25% all the way up to 5.5%. And in fact, the current interest rates has already surpassed the 2007 or 2008 mark. Okay. And meanwhile, if you take a look at Malaysia, I'm sure you guys know BNM, they've raised interest rates 5 times from 1.75% up to 3% only. So the pace of Bank Negara Malaysia's tightening, even though it's aggressive, right, is really nothing compared to the Federal Reserve. And everybody, especially global investors, right, like us, they want to look for the highest way to generate yield while being the safest. Okay, so why not just invest in the US dollars, right? Because fixed deposits, US treasuries, they're giving easily 4 to 5% right now. So that resulted in a lot of inflow towards the US dollar. Okay. So to add on more to that pressure, right? Add on more to the strength of the US dollar, right? The Federal Reserve hinted that more rate hikes are possible. In its most recent meeting on September 20th, which is Wednesday or Thursday, the Fed, although they held interest rates steady, they also indicated that they're still expecting one more rate hike before the end of the year. So previously markets, they were kind of not expecting this, okay? They were just expecting the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates steady at 5.25 to 5.50%. But now it's kind of out of the expectations, lah, okay, which led to a stronger dollar. In addition to holding rates at relatively high levels, the Fed is continuing to reduce the size of their balance sheet. And since June 2022, they have already recuperated $815 billion. So on the one hand, the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates, yeah, keeping it higher for longer. On the other hand, they're actually reducing the supply of US dollars in the economy, and that will obviously lead to a stronger US dollar. Okay, so though markets have already fully priced in the pause this meeting, which is on September 20th, there is considerable uncertainty on where the Fed will settle, which means where is the final point where the Federal Reserve will say that, hey, it's enough rate hikes for now. We may look to reduce interest rates in the future, or we will continue to pause, etc., etc. So that level is still pretty uncertain. Okay, and the S&P, which is the US market, fell nearly 1%. Nasdaq Composite fell 1.5%. So why is the US hiking rates? Yeah, this one is also pretty similar to why Bank Negara Malaysia is hiking rates. Yeah, and that is inflation. But unlike Malaysia, US inflation actually spiked to a four-decade high of 9.1% in July 2022, which is why the Federal Reserve is, they crank up the interest rate hike. Okay. And more recently, though it has been steadily declining, right? The recent US inflation figure spiked back up to 3.7%. And this places worry that whatever the Federal Reserve is doing, it's not really working, okay, or it's working pretty slowly, and that the Fed needs more interest rate hikes in order to tame price pressures. Okay. So we take a look at the US dollar in comparison to other Asian currencies, not just the ringgit. And if you didn't understand what I said in the previous, 4 to 5 minutes, that's entirely fine. Just take a look at this chart over here. Right, US dollar versus ringgit, dollar versus rupiah, dollar versus Thai baht, dollar versus Philippine peso. You will see that it is the strength of the dollar, okay, not only the weakness of the ringgit. Well, there is a bit of weakness in the ringgit lah, but majority of what we are seeing right now is due to dollar strength. Take a look at this trend over here. Ever since 2023, a lot of Asian currencies has lost steam against the US dollar. So high oil prices also propping the dollar up. Yeah, this goes without saying lah. The world's most traded commodity is oil. And what is it priced in? US dollars. Okay, so when oil prices go up, right, it leads to an increased demand for US dollars. And tracing back to the major factor that affects the strength of a currency, just now I told you guys, supply and demand, right? Increased demand leads to a stronger currency. You can see this chart, right? When I layer the dollar index on top of oil prices, it pretty much moves one to one, yeah, in recent trends. Okay. Another factor towards the weakness in the ringgit that we're seeing is due to China's economic slump. Okay, so China is Malaysia's largest trading partner since 2009, and in the first quarter of 2023, the total value of trade amounted to 108.7 billion ringgit, accounting for almost 17% of our total external trade. And there was a study conducted by the International Monetary Fund. A 1% decline in China's economy will lead to a 0.4 to 0.5% fall in Malaysia's GDP. Okay, and why is China facing an economic slump right now? Well, I kind of talked about it last week. Well, that's because of the nationwide real estate crisis. Okay, so China's real estate industry is so shaky that local governments are heavily dependent on tax revenue from land sales, as well as property taxes and real estate development fees. At the same time, about 70% of the general population's assets are invested in real estate. So the performance of the Chinese economy, right, heavily relies on what the real estate market is doing. Okay, and in the past 2 years itself, I think you guys have heard of Evergrande before, and a few other major property developers in China. Yeah, they have been toppling like dominoes lah. Okay, and that really brings a huge negative toll on China's real estate sector. And since China is heavily exposed to the real estate industry, China's economy has weakened, and that led to Malaysia's economy weakening as well. And so goes the story lah, the ringgit's weakness. Okay. Yeah, so that was kind of a bit of a long story as to why the ringgit is currently so weak, but hopefully it gave you guys some insight. And at the end of the day, we really need to move away from a weaker ringgit being detrimental. Okay, whenever people see, oh, ringgit melemah, this is bad news. But actually, if you look at the facts over here, there are winners and losers. Now, if you go to holiday abroad quite often, and if you are studying abroad, then that's bad news for you lah. Or if you are buying imports quite often, that's not really a good thing, a weakening ringgit. But there are winners, okay? That is exporters, the domestic tourist industry, our economic growth might also increase lah, okay? So what's next for the ringgit? Well, Bank Negara Malaysia, they have made it clear that their mandate is to tackle inflation, not to strengthen the ringgit. Okay, and since Malaysia's recent inflation figure has moderated to 2%, I did not include it in this slide. There's really no reason for Bank Negara Malaysia to raise the OPR in order to defend the ringgit. So next up, yeah, Turkish Lira losing 96% of its value against the US dollar. Just a quick comparison over here. If the ringgit is depreciating at the rate of the Turkish lira, right, then we should be worried. Okay, so I'll give you guys another example, right? Let's say this year, on a year-to-date basis, the ringgit fell by 30, 40, or even 50% against the US dollar. Meanwhile, other currencies like Thai baht, Philippine peso, they only decline by only about 2 to 3%. Then we should be worried. Then we should look at, hey, what's wrong with Malaysia? Is it the government's fault? Is it Bank Negara Malaysia's fault? Etc. etc. But for now, majority of the ringgit's weakness comes from external factors that are out of Malaysia's control. Okay. So yeah, on to the next topic. This one is the anonymous questions from you guys through NGL. And you guys were asking how much should a fresh grad's salary be? Well, this is in the case for people who are living in the Klang Valley in KL. Your minimum salary should be about 2.6K based on the Belanjawanku study. Okay, so obviously this is for car owners. If you don't own a car, then probably you need lesser to live. But I would just assume this is a flat figure for everyone living in KL lah. So you can use this as a benchmark. And bear in mind, this figure does not include mandatory EPF contributions. So if you want to factor that in, your minimum salary should be about 3,000 ringgit per month. And for those people who are living in other areas and for other categories, you are married without children, married with one child, you guys can refer to the numbers over here. The cheapest city or perhaps cheapest city to live in is Alostar. You only need about 2,000 ringgit per month to survive. Okay. So next up, what if you have not paid your taxes? Yeah, this is also another interesting question. Missed the deadline to file my taxes. What should I do? Yeah, this is quite I would say I wouldn't want to trigger panic, but this is quite a big offense. All right. Okay. If you did not pay your taxes, LHDN can fine you and you'll be charged for late interest payment up to 45%, depending on how long you've owed the tax lah. Okay, you can see over here up to 20,000 ringgit fine or even an imprisonment of not more than 6 months. Okay, so even if you have missed the deadline already, right, you still have to file your taxes. Okay, let's say you miss for year 2021, yeah, assessment year 2021. Right now, you still have to file for it because at the end of the day, if you get audited, you'll get in big trouble now, okay? And they will count back to how long you've missed all your payments and charge you additional interest. So right now, there's actually a special voluntary disclosure program conducted by LHDN. So lasting from now until 31st May 2024, for those people who are new taxpayers who have not filed their tax returns, and for existing taxpayers who have underdeclared their income or filed their taxes wrongly, you can actually go to LHDN and file your taxes, no questions asked, and they will not charge you a single cent. They will not penalty you, you will not go to jail, and you will not be fined at all. And the voluntary disclosure will be accepted in good faith. So yeah, there's a question from Alex. Okay, any good news sources to recommend that focus on currency news, or just stay tuned on general newspapers like The Edge or Bloomberg, etc.? Okay, this is a good question. Okay, so for currency movements, right, there is a very good source that I always take a look at, and that's MIDF. So MIDF, you go look for MIDF reports. I will send you guys the link later. Okay, and you scroll down. Every week they actually do a currency review. Okay, you can see over here, there's so many reports, okay, and each of these reports, right, is just gold. Okay, just go and take a look at it. Yeah, weekly money review over here. Okay, so that kind of gives you a good grasp as to what's happening to global currencies right now, the Federal Reserve, the UST market. And once a month, they actually do like a currency movement analysis. And that's where I got my MIDF's projection, etc., etc. Over here, you can see monthly currency review. You download the report, right? You'll be able to see what are MIDF's thoughts. Yeah, in fact, MIDF expects the ringgit to appreciate to 4.24 by year end. Okay, it says here this report. So, considering that the US Federal Reserve is still forecasted to raise interest rates and China's economic slump, right? This call may be a bit too optimistic, because if you read the report, right, MIDF says that it is banking on the fact that the Federal Reserve will keep Fed funds rate unchanged at 5.25 to 5.50%. Okay, and Bank Negara Malaysia has to maintain the OPR at 3.00%. Where can we safely invest in crypto? Okay, short answer, the safest place to invest in crypto, assuming that you're Malaysian, is Luno. A long answer, well, you gotta check lah. Okay, you gotta, let's say you have money in Binance right now, you have money in Huobi or other exchanges. You have to check to see whether it's regulated by the Securities Commission of Malaysia. So you can actually go to crypto exchanges, Securities Commission Malaysia, and you can see which is registered as a digital asset exchange. Okay, and as long as you are within these exchanges, you're kind of safe because you're protected by the Securities Commission of Malaysia. And this protection extends to, say, if Luno goes bankrupt, etc., etc., there's actually a chance for you to claim back your funds. Okay, but for those exchanges which are not recognized and are actually banned, quote unquote, banned by the Securities Commission of Malaysia, it's not to say that you cannot actually put your money in there. You can. Okay, there's no law stating that it's illegal to put money into Binance or whatnot. You can, but if Binance goes bust, right, and if something happens to Binance, there's no way for you to claim back your funds. Okay, so I just feel that you guys should know about this. A quick shout out to all our current learners and gatherers, our patrons. Thank you all so much for your support. Allow me to start with Andrew, Wendy, Edward, Alex, CC is Morpheus, Urshad, Caveman Balls, Kelvin, Kai, Tommy, Jinkang, Adrian, Eric, JS, Wenyan, Dean, Duhan, Ken, Faris, Alan, and Jackson, as well as all of our learner members. For those of you guys who have not yet joined our Patreon membership, now's the best opportunity to do so. You can actually join it first 7 days for completely free, and the most affordable package comes in at only $1 per month. Okay, guys, bye. Good night.